record. Excellent timing. Thank you. So thank you everyone for coming to our virtual event today on building your IO resume. IO standing for Industrial Organizational Psychology. We did say this a lot in our marketing of this event. You don't have to be an IO to find value of today's session. In fact, two of our panelists are not in the IO community, but they are experts when it comes to resume building, career advice, and LinkedIn, and all about showcasing your skills. However, we do have a couple panelists who are in the IO field and can talk about that from a lens of being an IO. As far as the structure today, after a couple minutes of me doing an introduction, we are going to introduce you to the panelists, giving their quick bio and credentials. I do want to tell you a little bit about who you are, the attendees. And then we are going to spend majority of our time together today hearing from our expert panelists. At the very end, my colleague Amelia will recap some key findings. And this is not what we said on our social media pages, but what I put in an email. It's optional to stick on after for about 15 to 20 minutes if you'd like, for some networking breakout groups and the opportunity to maybe swap resumes with someone and give each other advice offline. So again, that's completely optional after the event's over. I did not introduce myself. My name is Sevelyn Crosby, and I am the author of this children's book, My Mommy is an Organizational Psychologist. I'll tell you a little bit more about that book in a moment, but really my passion is all about IO visibility. And my colleague, Amelia, and I always try to have events throughout the year to create value for our IO community. So that's why we're hosting the event today. You'll see here that we have our social media pages. I really want you to go onto our website, which I'll put in the chat in a minute, and purchase a copy of our book today. So that's a way you can show us support and help us out as we continue to support the IO community. To show appreciation to you, we do have a 25% off promo code, and I'll add that in the chat for you as well. But before I add that link in, I want to start off with this one. So in the past, when we've had these virtual events, we've created a Google Doc where all you have to do is go in there, add your LinkedIn URL, and then it's an easy way for all of you to connect with one another. So if you'd like to participate in that, I put the Google Doc in the chat for you now. What else do I have as key points to hit? I already said it, but one more time, after our event's over, so after 5 p.m. PST, if you want to stay on for 15 to 20 minutes, we will have some breakout activities and the opportunity to swap your resume. All right, Amelia, I think we can go to the next slide where I introduce our panelists. So again, I want to say a huge thank you to these 4 people. These are mine and Amelia's close friends, colleagues, that the relationships we've cultivated with these experts over the years. So big thank you to these 4 individuals. Without you, this would be a really boring event. So thank you. I'll now introduce them before I talk a little bit more about you as the attendees. So first up, I'll introduce Dustin. Dustin Bauer holds a Master's of Science in Industrial Organizational Psychology from Cal Baptist University. His diverse experience spans various sectors, including serving as a pro bono consultant, leading in retail, volunteering with PSYOP, and teaching as a professor. Currently, he works in the utility industry. After graduating, Dustin joined SoCal Edison as a contract worker, analyzing meter data for customer billing operations in 2019. His expertise in data analysis, reporting, and visualization quickly propelled him to the role of senior analyst, making data more accessible to executives. Recently, he has transitioned to a new role in the business transformation for corporate accounting, where he is designing the future of financial systems and reporting at SCE. Next up for you, I have Heather Carrasco. She is first in her family to graduate from college. Heather has her Master of Science in Industrial and Organizational Psychology from California State University, San Bernardino. During her time as a student, she received several awards and scholarships and was named Graduate Student of the Year in Service in 2017. Heather has worked as external and internal consultant. In her current role, she partners with executives and leaders to enhance working relationships and improve organizational effectiveness. Next up for you, I have Camille Gatenby. She leads the team responsible for the recruitment of talent from interns through executives at Blue Shield of California. Camille brings 2 decades of operations, IT, and HR functional experience gained across Fortune 500 companies like GE, Western Digital, and Cisco Systems. She led programs across a myriad of IT and engineering teams before pitching a career directory to HR, leading university relations for Cisco in 2010. Of Portuguese and Filipino descent, Camille is first-generation immigrant from Hong Kong and is a first-generation graduate of Santa Clara University. Leavely School of Business with BS in Commerce and Operations and Management Information Systems. Oh my goodness, that is a handful degree name, Camille. Next up for you, I have Travis Raynaud, serves as our lead career counselor supporting students in the Orfalea College of Business. He holds a BA in Psychology and Child Development from California Polytechnic University, San Luis Obispo, and also has an MA in Counseling and Guidance for Higher Education from Cal Poly. His additional higher education experience includes academic advising, orientation, and student programming. Travis has helped Cal Poly students, alumni, faculty, and staff navigate their career paths since fall of 2015. Woo! Thank you so much, panelists. As you can see, I hope you realize these are the experts in the field, whether they're IO background or not, and they're really going to help answer many of the questions you have today. Next slide, if you will, Amelia. So I do like to show this. In the registration survey, we asked you some questions about your background and if you had specific questions for the panelists. So I do think it's important to see that about 40% of you who registered for the event are in the IO professional field. About a quarter of you are IO master students and a quarter of you are IO PhD students. And that leaves about a quarter or so of people that maybe didn't easily fall into one of those categories. So we've taken the questions you asked and we made sure to try to make them applicable to this diverse background, whether it's questions on people who have been in the professional world for a while, or you're recently transitioning into IO, or perhaps you're still a student looking to showcase your grad school skills. So you'll hear some of those questions soon, but if you have additional questions, go ahead and add them to the chat, because if we have time at the end, maybe we can pull 1 or 2 of them for the panelists. All right, we are ready to finally jump in to the moderated portion of our event. We have about 2 to 3 questions per 4 panelists, and we'll just go ahead and jump in. So the first question I have is for Camille. By now, you've seen thousands of resumes. What advice do you have on making your resume stand out? How can you get past those ATS systems?
That is a question I get asked quite frequently. Thank you, Sevelin. And it's so nice to be here and to make all of your introductions. I'm going to give you 3 practical tips. Okay, so grab your pen, write them down. Number 1, you want to tell a progressive story. Okay, the resume is not just a list of activities. I always look for a resume that shows progression and growth in its entirety, not just within each section of your experience. And I'm also looking for diversity. My team looks for diversity of experiences as well. So I'd say that breadth really matters, but you also want to strike a balance with depth. I think one of the red flags for our teams is if there is too much job hopping or too much experience hopping, wherein you can really start to tell that you're really just skimming across things versus having garnered some true, meaningful, valuable experience and or having made valuable contributions. I think that gets me to the second point, which is I have a pet peeve that when I see a resume that looks like it was lifted from a job description, that's not great. You don't want to list activities and duties. You actually want to list measurable outcomes and results. And as best you can explain, how did the initiative, project, or experience benefit from you and what impact you made? by reducing, I'm just going to make it up, reducing inefficiency by X% and explaining how and what you did to accomplish that. And then lastly, I think it's really important to do your homework and your research because the ATS systems are really, can get clogged up very quickly. There are still humans on the other side looking across thousands, as Sevlin mentioned, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of resumes. Hopefully AI is going to help us with that shortly. But what I would say is you want to really leverage the power of your connections. I recently hired a senior manager to head up IT recruiting, and we actually didn't get to his resume. It was bypassed, and he took it upon himself to reach out and send me, excuse me, and my leader a personal note. And it got us to take a second look. So look at the connections of the people who work there, reach out, and don't be afraid to send a personalized note. And I would say strike a good balance between being tenacious but not aggressive. Those are my top 3 tips.
Thank you so much. And actually, a couple really just stood out to me. I'm currently a hiring manager, so I've been looking at a lot of resumes and interviewing. And I could tell in some of the resumes when someone just took exactly keywords from the job description. You want to use the keywords to get past the tracking, but I could tell like you just copied and pasted. So
Yeah.
that's a really good tip.
Yeah, and I mean what you said, Sevlin, hits it in the sense that you, as the TA recruit, the person sitting in talent acquisition or recruiting, really has this keen eye to understand if it's passed through your filter. The
Mm,
filter of you being able to articulate your value. And so you do want to pass it through your own lens and your own filter of what you've really accomplished.
thank you. All right, next up, I have a question for Travis. What's the best way to tailor academic projects to match the job requirements while creating your resume and or LinkedIn?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to start actually with LinkedIn. I hope all of you have a LinkedIn. I tell my students, alumni, and staff that I really should get a paycheck from LinkedIn for how often I talk about it. And that's because regardless of your industry, it's a professional networking tool. It's a visual tool for your professional brand. And so if you're not maximizing it, you're really missing a huge component of what could be helping set yourself apart from your peers. And why I think to Sevlin's question about how to maximize that tool with your academic projects, like LinkedIn innately is more visual than your resume. You know, I don't want to see, and I think Camille can speak to this, I don't want to see a picture of you on your resume. I don't want to see overly designed and graphic resumes. Like that's not what we're going for. But on your LinkedIn, I love to see visuals of your work. I love to see graphs that you created. If you solved a problem, walk me through what that looked like. If you, honestly, even if you have long, well-researched papers, I'll be honest, I'm not going to read that paper off of your LinkedIn, but seeing it attached to your experience shows me this is an accomplishment. You wouldn't be publishing it on your LinkedIn if you didn't think it was something that you'd want others to view. So visually, I want you to just think about the multimedia aspect that you can use LinkedIn, videos, graphics, charts, research papers. Add those, ping those to your projects. And then when it comes to your resume, I really challenge you all to remove the barrier of this idea of whether it was in a PhD program, whether it was in a master's program, whether it was in your professional work. I don't care about the setting. I care about the work you completed. So if you're tucking something into the second half of your resume because that's what you did in your PhD program and you've now been in industry for 10 years, but that assignment is really relevant to the job you're applying to, I don't want to have to turn to the second page of your resume. I want that to move up to the top. So I think sometimes we limit ourselves by putting things in a chronological order and based off of professional work experience versus academic experience. And that's not the best way to organize a resume. Like your relevant experience needs to be at the top, and you can really customize that based on your headings. So there's a lot more I can get into, but I'll try to keep it brief.
Thank you. Okay, so kind of my takeaway with that is like example projects and works, hyperlink on your LinkedIn, that's an appropriate place. And ordering of a resume really matters so you can catch their eye. I kind of just want to throw this out to any of the 4 panelists. How many pages is too many on a resume?
3.
3 is too many. Front
No
and
more
back, try
than
to keep it to
2.
maybe 2.
Mhm.
2 max if you've really been working for a long time. I think if you're starting your career, you've got to be able to do it in 1 page. If you have less than 10 years of experience and you're writing more than 2 pages, into 2 pages, I start to think, oh, are we over elaborating? So my rule of thumb is, 1 page for every decade of experience.
I'll just quickly add, I agree. Yeah, 2 pages. If you have a lot of robust experience in 10 years, definitely 2 pages. I don't need to see repeated experiences. So like a setting where maybe you conducted a really thorough project in your PhD program, and then you're currently doing that in your role. I don't need to see it from your PhD program because it's kind of repetitive. The example I use for undergrad students is if you're a babysitter in high school and you're a nanny now, I don't need to see the babysitter anymore.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Okay, Dustin, question for you. As an IO, again, industrial organizational psychologist, what type of job titles should we be looking for? Sometimes it's challenging to search on LinkedIn for job titles aligned to IO psychology.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, there's the traditional roles in terms of like human resource specialist, OD consultant, talent management, a lot of like learning and development trainer roles that people typically try to look for. I think that realistically, when it comes to doing the job searches, kind of knowing what you're good at will help kind of structure where you're going to go within your job search, right? So in other words, I'm not going to be well fit for maybe something like talent management, but I do know I'm really good with numbers, right? And so I'll think about becoming like an analyst or a systems analyst or something like that for HR information systems. So knowing what you're good at will help you kind of hone in what to tailor your resume to when you do apply to these positions. Secondly, I would say define the limitations of how close you want to stay to IO as a job, like job title, so to speak, and trying to match the field with the job. Because one of the things that I did notice is my openness to kind of using the IO tool set, using IO skills in a context of something that is completely different, was a little bit shifted as my job search went on, right? So as my job search went on, it became a little bit broader. 3 is kind of understanding how powerful your network is. Now, I'm not saying that your network is going to give you a job. What I'm saying is there are folks that I have particularly viewed as mentors who gave me feedback on my resume, who gave me feedback using informational interviews, things like that, that really was beneficial to me in long term. Finally, I would say that making your resume available to job search websites is also really important. That's how I got a lot of my visibility when I was looking for work. So posting on LinkedIn, Monster, Indeed, all those different websites could also be beneficial. I would say one caveat that I would have for doing that is just being careful. There are some folks that are not necessarily good actors out there who are looking to take advantage of folks who are looking for jobs. So just be careful with what information you give out to folks that you don't know. And I think that would be my top.
Thank you, Dustin. When I was finishing my PhD program and kind of wrapping up external consulting work, trying to figure out what was next for me, I did take a similar approach, what you said at the beginning of, well, what am I good at? What do I want to dive deeper into? And I focused more on like the talent strategy space, and that's how I got the role I have today. Heather, you're also an IO. Do you want to add anything onto that of how to look for IO style jobs when typically the job title doesn't actually say IO in it?
That's interesting. Well, to a point that Dustin had said, and I put it in the chat about being careful for people who might be not great. not great, folks. Be careful, because I've had recruiters ask for my social security number and they're like, it's a great job, it's at Microsoft, it's at Meta. And I'm thinking, no, you don't need my social security number. That's ridiculous. But in terms of looking for jobs, when I was job seeking, I would look for LinkedIn's great, a great resource. So I would put in organizational development or something that's IO related that I would know. And then jobs would appear that are related that would fit my profile. So employee engagement coordinator would show up. And then over time, I would just kind of keep a track and a list of what are jobs that I'm seeing that I like. It's not so much the title that's important, but what's important is the job duties.
Yes. Okay. So don't focus too much on the job title. Check the description and see if that's going to match your needs. I do have a next question for you, Heather. How can I highlight my IO skills that I've learned in graduate school and taking emphasis off the other years of experience maybe that are non-related, like an executive assistant, office coordinator? Is there a way to connect those skills to IO skills or qualifications?
Yes. So I think Camille I would love to hear her feedback on this, but I would say if you have, or you don't maybe have a lot of job experience, there's two types of resume. There's a chronological and there's a functional. And I've always heard a lot of recruiters don't like functional resumes. And like Camille's shaking her head, but I think if you have to, and because you don't have a lot of that job experience, then a functional resume might be the route. And chronological is listing your previous jobs, however jobs you want to go back, and the functional just kind of combines it all together and lists out the type of activities you've done. So that's one route that you can take. I would also, encourage folks to think about other things that you've done in graduate school if you're a part of a club. So I was a president of psychology club, and I still give letters or recommendations to folks years later. So that's something that you can also highlight. You don't have to maybe say it's a social club, but you can tweak your words to say, maybe you delivered a social event, maybe you did a panel like this, you were part of that. You can highlight that and maybe not have to be so specific on the actual, like where it's from, like what Travis was saying, in terms of remove the setting, but maybe just talk about the KPIs, which are, the key indicators, what's the outcome that happened with that. And I think there's a lot of opportunities with the work that you've done in your graduate studies. So if you've done a lot of presentations, you can highlight that in there, effective at delivering presentations. You don't have to say they were all in graduate school, but that's another opportunity there. There was somebody who was in my graduate program. They finished their thesis really quicker than most people do, and they were able to speak to that in their interview. So there's a lot of opportunities that you can think about. It's just really being creative, and sometimes attending panels like this, and you can hear how you can be creative in your resume applying, it can help you.
Yeah, that's the second time now I've heard a couple panelists mention those KPIs or key performance indicators. When I was reviewing the resumes for the open role I have right now, I would say the ones that had those numbers or something measurable also really stood out. So that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, next up, Travis, what are some best practices for using AI or artificial intelligence to craft resumes? What advice do you have for using AI to aid in the job search process?
Yeah, it's here to stay, so don't ignore it or don't try to fight it. So work with it. I think when I'm telling students or faculty staff, any of the constituents I work with who are in the process, I try to encourage them first to say, like, whether it's, ChatGPT or any OpenAI, like, no one knows you better than you. So use the tool to your advantage. Simple things like you find a job that you want to apply to based off of LinkedIn or wherever, pop that into the prompt and say, give me 10 to 15 potential interview questions based off of this job description. I love when applicants can like describe a project that they've worked on and put it into the prompt and say, please summarize this into 4 succinct bullets. But what I always tell them is you need to, and this isn't the best terminology, but you kind of need to massage the prompt, meaning you need to work with it. So it's going to give you a response that's too robotic. So you're going to have to go in there and say like, make this more conversational, or add some numbers, and maybe you need to put in those numbers. Change the terminology to be more focused on these DEI keywords. So I think the summary of that is like, you're never going to just be able to copy and paste something into the prompt, take it and then put it into your resume, put it into your LinkedIn, work with it, and use it to your advantage. I think I've had really great success in reviewing applicants who have used AI to, craft like a nice story of their career. And that's not going to be what they post anywhere, but there's going to be elements of it that they can add to their LinkedIn, or they can add to their professional summary. They can add to a bullet somewhere. So I think what I want to kind of summarize with that is use it, don't fight it, be smarter than it, and know that no one knows you better than you. So as you work with the tool, it can still add a ton of value to your materials.
Right. So, maybe using it, but remembering to put your own personal brand or your own voice to it. All right. The next question I have, and so sorry, I lost my place in my questions. There we go. Okay, the next question I have is for Dustin. Dustin, what advice do you have for effectively showcasing educational or volunteer projects on a resume to demonstrate relevant skills and experience, particularly for individuals transitioning into new career paths or recent graduates with limited professional experience?
Yeah, and that's a great question. This is one thing that I definitely did a lot of when I was newly graduated. I remember I graduated and I quit my job just because I was ready to move on to something new, and was like, I got a master's degree, here we go, I can do it. And I had a really hard time. It took me a few months to actually get another job, but a lot of things that I learned, and kind of going back into that prior question, or some of the lessons that I learned when I was looking for work. So in terms of showcasing educational and volunteer projects, I had a lot of volunteering under my belt. I volunteered with SciOp for a few years. I also did a couple of research projects, specifically on like employability, and then additionally one on likeness in the workplace. So all very interesting research, but I had no way to actually show it. And so one of the things that I do is on my resumes, typically I will have a projects section where I can put that there, right? And then of course, highlighting some of the details of the projects, why it's important, and then, at the end, delivering the value in terms of what was the outcome, what were some of the KPIs that you sort of followed in order to develop this in a timely manner, right? One huge thing for me is the volunteer experience. So if you are volunteering, one of the things you may want to do is to put a header that says volunteer experience, relevant volunteer experience, or something of that nature. I don't suggest doing that. And I'll be quite honest. So when I was in 2018, when I was looking for work, I actually had just found that in 2018, due to new legislation here in California, that it was actually illegal for employers to ask what you're currently making in your position. So I took that as a green light, and what I ended up doing was forget work experience, volunteer experience. Instead, I put professional and analytical experience, and I put everything that I had worked on, and all the different things basically that I had been working on, because I worked very hard for that, right? And I felt like by saying, "Hey, I did this for free," it was kind of devaluing the actual impact that I had within the work, right? And so I found a lot more success when I did that, because it didn't sort of shrink it. Because when I was applying for work, I noticed a lot of times people didn't really value like the hey, oh wow, you gave your time away for free sort of experiences. So yeah, that would be sort of my tips and tricks for that.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like kind of a common theme I'm noticing with different feedback from the panelists is like showcasing your work. And I think I struggled with that as well, is when I thought about some of the difficult projects I had to do as a master's student and then a PhD student, like that experience did craft the skill sets I'm using today. So it's okay to showcase those and be proud of that work. So I kind of asked Dustin a question on what if you're earlier in your career, don't have a lot of IO experience? The question I have for Heather is kind of the opposite. What if you have a lot of IO experience? So how can you best showcase 15 plus years of IO experience without the inherent age discrimination that often comes with it?
It's interesting because there was my old boss hitting 60 pretty soon and did experience what he thought was age discrimination. So what he did was maybe look and leverage, okay, or think about it. So how many years of experience, if I'm backtracking, maybe I don't need to showcase everything or, all the jobs that I've had. Maybe I can go back the last 10 years, which is something that you may want to do anyways. And you can put relevant years of experience as a header. And so that might be a way to bypass it. And I know that's what my former boss did do at one point, because he just felt like he wasn't getting a lot of callbacks. So that's one way you can do it. And then leverage that too, because if you do have a lot of years of experience, some people might be excited for that. If you have a summary in the top, over 15 years of experience as a human resource professional, I think some people would be excited to see that. So I guess just leverage what you have to offer, and it has to really be creative and thinking about how you're presenting, and then making sure that I guess it's going to happen, unfortunately, if you are later in your years, but you need to think about how do you leverage it to your advantage. So I would say that would be one recommendation, is maybe not list out all your years of experience that you have, because you really shouldn't. You really want to go back a little bit. I know we talked about decades, but don't go back too far. You don't need to go back to when you're 16 working at a pizza place. Look back to maybe the last 10 years. I see Camille go off me, and I'm curious to hear her experience too.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Heather. I think on this one, it can be tricky for folks, and I'm going to say a couple things that might be provocative just based on what I've heard. I do think, this is personal opinion, Camille opinion of one. Well, everyone here can call me Cammy now. That's what I go by. I actually believe that when you can demonstrate, and again, there's two sides to this, right? It's what you feel most comfortable with. To Dustin's comment about the volunteering, if that was your lived experience, and what I heard in that was, Dustin, take it and try a different approach and feel like it worked and got him results, that's within your freedom to do that. And that is all about experimentation and learning and sort of tinkering and fiddling with the dials as you're on the journey. I personally believe, and that it might also be some of the research you do when you're looking at employers, that as the leader for talent at Blue Shield, our giving back and corporate citizenship is a massive program here. So we emphasize and put a lot of importance. And the way I read it is, if you had time to volunteer on top of your studies or a part-time job, that speaks to me of high performance and going and reaching higher. So I actually give lots of brownie points for that. As it relates to the age piece, I think one of the most compelling things that you can do when you're crafting, again, keyword, your story, is that as you find yourself increasing in scope and complexity of your work, we are all going to age, and we are all going to get old, and we are all going to not be here one day. What is important to know is how you've grown in it by going from sort of an individual contributor to mentoring and teaching others, to scaling your leadership, to scaling your skill set, to reaching, like the more reach you have, where you can demonstrate that you are helping others grow in a team setting as a mentor, as a sponsor, that starts to elevate and get you where the experience match and depth and richness of that experience aligns to the numeric age, which, by the way, I don't acknowledge. It's a relative thing. So, you know, it's really important to kind of approach it from that mindset versus, okay, how do I actually, yes, you can edit, but it's also about richness in the experience as you progress in your career, which will naturally happen with aging.
Thank you for adding on. I do
Good.
have one final question, and then we'll go around and popcorn to the panelists at the very end. And this one's for you, Camille. It is another AI question. How do you see AI impacting the job application process, particularly in terms of candidate selection and evaluation? And when we talk about AI, we tend to also talk about skills and needing to reskill. So with organizations shifting to a skills-based hiring model, how do I showcase my skills on a resume?
Yeah, so this is a complex space, one
I
that
know we
I'm
could have
not
an
going to.
entire webinar just on that.
Yes, yes, we could. And actually, LinkedIn, I was fortunate enough to attend a road show with LinkedIn. And that was the entire topic. So I'm grateful to be able to share with you some of the learnings from that. And I picked out a couple things that I wanted to kind of give everyone as just, you know, I love stats and factoids and data. So change is changing faster. And the rate of change is just continues to speed up. And by 2030, so 4 in 5 people actually want to learn how to use AI in their profession. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. So everyone knows about it. What is it? Curious. I want to do it. How do I do it? So that's point number one. Point number two is by 2030, the skills needed for the average job will have changed by 65%. That's in less than 6 years. In 8 years, so 8 years before this, skills for a job changed by 25%. So that rate of change continues to expand. So there's this transformation happening. I think Travis was spot on when he said use it. One of the pieces that I took away that you can start to do now is to lean into AI. Use the tools that are immediately available to you without you pretty much even having to look. So one of the things that I do, and no shame in my game, is when I go onto LinkedIn to post something, I let AI write it for me. And I go, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. But there's tweaks and nuances that I have to really still make my own tone, or gosh, that's not what I was trying to say. So I think that's really important to kind of bear in mind when it comes to, so there's two things happening on the talent landscape is, yes, all of these tools can do these things for us. They just sort of create, if you imagine a funnel, the rules and the logic and the systems that we put in place for talent creates that funnel so that we're seeing the best match. And what happens with AI in recruiting, as with all industries, is that the high volume work of cranking through, looking at all the resumes, of moving them along, will now be replaced or augmented with bots or with AI models. That puts talent acquisition and recruiters into sort of this top right corner of a matrix on when you think about skill level and volume. So the volume might be lower, but the skills that we need are completely different. It's really about the high skills work that we now need to focus on. So while we've got machinery doing all of this for us, and that's why the whole point of your resume is like make it clean, make it robust so that it passes through all that logic. When it comes to actually being in front of a recruiter and what you're actually going to need to be able to demonstrate and prove is that you have the skills. And I will tell you that the top skills probably just, and I'm going to say, because it's hundreds of thousands of resumes, breathing and living in this space for 10 plus years, there are some key answers to the test I'm going to give you all right now. in terms of skills. Number one, we talked about it, storytelling. You got to be a good storyteller. Find someone who does this well and learn from them. My key storyteller growing up was Oprah. Research, being able to go dig, find things out, figuring out how things work and teaching yourself things is going to be the skill of like the millennium. You're just going to have to figure it out and learn and teach yourself. Insights with the data. Data without a story is just data. So how do you look for fact patterns within the data to prove a point? Idea expression is going to be very important. How you communicate, how you pick up on nuances because of AI, how you're able to determine sentiment, how you can read body language and intonation. AI can do that, but with limitations. So we're also thinking about, yes, AI can do a lot, but there are things that it cannot. And so when you really think about what are the things it cannot do, that's where you want to really emphasize. And those are some of the things I mentioned that they cannot do. And finally, leading and collaboration. Bots can't do that. So you really want to focus on that. The last thing I want to say, and then I'm going to stop before Seb gives me the polite time check, is I was thinking and reflecting today about spending time with you all. And this morning on my Facebook feed, I saw this awesome little graphic that I just wanted to read to you all because I think it sums it up really well. And it says, if you spend your time chasing butterflies, they'll fly away. But if you spend your time making a beautiful garden, the butterflies will come to you. When you focus on improving yourself, everything will want to come to you. We attract based on who we are, not what we want. Don't chase, attract. So that's my drop the mic moment on what is this whole game all about when it comes to, you can either let it scare you, you can let it energize you, focus on what you are about, not what everyone else and around you wants you to.
Thank you. I love that. So Camille and I work together currently at Blue Shield, and I always rely on her for fun visuals and references. So that was a really good example of who you are. I'm going to end by asking one final question to all the panelists. Camille, you kind of started to do it already, so I'm just going to start with you. Of the things you just said, it was about using AI, making sure to kind of hone in on the people side of things that can't be replaced. You talked a lot about storytelling, but if you had to say one thing you want them to remember, would it be the butterfly? What would it be?
If I wanted you, so walking away from today, if there is one thing I want you to take away and remember, it is that the resume and the story must be uniquely yours. Uniquely yours, your fingerprint, your DNA, and that's what I would say.
Excellent. All right, I will popcorn next to Dustin. You wanted everyone to remember one thing from today's virtual event: resume, LinkedIn, IO skills, any of it. What would it be?
I would just say if I had one thing I wanted people to remember is just that finding work, it can be very difficult, can be time consuming, and it definitely can get frustrating. So just don't give up, right? And that's really the key of this, right? You keep trying new things, try different ways of telling your story, right? And eventually, what it says is opportunity is luck and preparedness, right? And if you're prepared, once that little bit of luck starts rubbing off, you'll have your opportunity and you'll succeed. So
Thank you. Heather, what's one takeaway you'd like everyone to remember?
I think Dustin and I are in sync because I was absolutely going to say that the first part is applying to jobs can be demoralizing because you're having to be vulnerable, put yourself out there and keep applying, and then you have to pass those applicant tracking systems. But today you learned some really good, valuable tools. And one thing that I had learned from different panels being on, and somebody had said once, and I love this, don't psych yourself out from applying to a job. Don't let you be the person who's saying no. If anything, like let the manager or hiring manager, whoever, they can say no, but don't stop yourself from applying to the job. Keep trying to apply. And I honestly wholeheartedly believe that you will find the job that you are meant to be. And I do think that sometimes we're put in places in past that we're meant to belong. It took me a year to get in the job I'm at now, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I love the people. I love the culture. I love everything. It took a long time. I cried multiple times. It was hard. I was frustrated. I was mad. But in the end, I got to be where I'm at now. And it just took a lot of grit and it took time and dedication.
Thank you. And Travis, one takeaway you'd like everyone to remember?
Oh man, no pressure. Yeah, as Camille was talking, it's so funny because I feel like my role is preparing people to get to Cammie's point, which is to see the applicant. And so I can't stress enough the importance of storytelling, like your unique way to convey who you are in a memorable way is like you can't put a price tag on that. But I want to add one other thing. And this is going to come from my work with business and working with business graduate students is do not forget about the value of your brand. Your professional brand means so much. So whether that be for those of you who are seeking jobs or moving jobs or in a current role and maybe trying to leverage that to a higher position, you all know this because you're professionals, but your peers don't. So I encourage you to tell them. Be mindful of what time you're sending emails. Be mindful of how long it takes you to respond to emails. If you have a meeting with a supervisor, send a thank you note or recap what you talked about in that meeting. If you're interviewing with Cammy, ask good questions, write down good responses, and in your email to her, reflect on that. Like those little moments honestly mean far more than the PhD you have. They mean far more than the resume you've developed. I will hire someone who doesn't have all the qualifications, who did those things, who reached out to me with good, thoughtful questions, who, did a coffee chat with some of my colleagues before to show her genuine enthusiasm. So I could go on and on. Brand is something that I'm really passionate about, but I encourage you all to start to think really intentionally about what you want your brand to be.
Kind of reminds me of that phrase I feel like my parents would always say, like actions speak louder than words. So how you show up, how you treat others will stand out. Okay, with our last few minutes, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Amelia, and she's going to just wrap us up with some key takeaways and some last minute tips and tricks. So just kind of trying to package everything we just heard together. Amelia, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Seb. And thank you to all the panelists for all of your words of wisdom and advice. And thank you to all the attendees for being here. And like Seb said, just to wrap it up, some of the tips and tricks, takeaways for you to think about this evening as you go on. Some advice from our panelists. So of course, when you're crafting your resume, be mindful of the number of pages. I loved Cammie's advice about 1 page per decade. So keep in mind that there are people on the other side of the computer or the applicant tracking system reading these, and telling your story is really important and a great way to convey that in that limited number of pages. Also keeping things simple. Again, going back to being mindful of who's reviewing it, having everything laid out to where they can see your story, they can see your experience. They're not having to search around and scroll through pages to see what story you're trying to tell or how you fit into the experience. Again, the storytelling, which I think is a huge takeaway from this panel, using action words, showing where you've had impact, showing your growth as you've moved on professionally through roles. And then, of course, always keeping it professional, using your professional email, file names, things like that, whether you're, sending along a thank you note or applying to a job, keeping in mind that professional aspect, which I'm sure as professionals we all know. And then some things to avoid. I loved Travis's story or example of keep things simple on your resume, but save all your creativity, your photo, your formatting for your LinkedIn. And that's a great place where you have your personal space to share that story, share your photo, share any personal information or things that might not fit into your resume. And then again, kind of touching on those elaborate templates, being mindful of the applicant tracking systems. And going back to AI, which was another big topic. So while AI is a helpful tool, it's here to stay. Like Travis and Camille mentioned, you know your experience and your story better than AI. So if you want to use AI to help you, definitely do that, but be mindful of the output that it provides you and always make sure that you go back and ensure that it has your DNA, your fingerprint on that. So with that, I hope you were able to take some helpful hints away, whether you're on your job search or going to start a job search. Again, thank you to our panelists for all of the expertise and valuable insight that they've provided. And thank you all for spending your time with us this evening. As I've mentioned at the top of the hour, we would like to provide an opportunity for you to network, meet some of the other attendees. So if you would like to, you are more than welcome to hang on, and we'll go ahead and start some breakout rooms. I can share some questions. No pressure to stay on. So we'll go ahead and get started with that in just a few minutes.
Yes, thank you again, everyone. And just want to reiterate that if you want to stay on, the breakout room is intended for networking and then kind of a way to pick and pair up with someone and maybe swap LinkedIn's to review later, share your resume for feedback. So completely optional, but thank you so much for joining for our virtual event.